Hey folks, GHAZZY TV here with another Path of Exile video. In this one, inspired by It's Joji, the man himself, we're going to make a tier list of minion skills in Path of Exile. So I'm going to give a quick TLDR of my current opinions on certain minion skills in the game, of where they land. And but yeah, that's basically the plan. I'm going to start with going from the left to right with these abilities, and the first one is actually Animate Guardian. Let's just dive into it, shall we? Just keep in mind that this tier list is of my personal preferences. It's not entirely a show of which build is the best and whatnot. You can take my word for it if you want to, but it's up to you. This is just my personal take on this list. So, Animate Guardian is a pretty cool ability. Now, obviously, for those of you who don't know, the Animate Guardian can be used in quite a few different ways. You can use a Chains of Command, which looks like this, where the Animate Guardian's weapons will be your animate weapons that he is generating, which is pretty cool. However, I'm not a big fan of that build. I don't think that the build itself is very good these days. So mostly Animate Guardians are used for two purposes. One is for low-budget approaches, where you are scaling up buffs such as movement speed to nearby allies, including yourself, that is. It also is there to increase the efficiency of damage. In high-budget versions, there's quite a few different things you can do with this, which is why I think that the Animate Guardian is definitely up on an A tier. You don't have to use him, but I definitely think that he's really, really cool to have. Because if you're going for a high budget build, the Animate Guardian is able to squeeze out so much damage for the build. It's crazy. You can get a Kingmaker with 50% critical strike multiplier. He gets fortified to nearby allies. It's just insane of how much you can do with the Animate Guardian. And if you go with the high budget version where you're keeping him alive, then you can actually make him do an additional curse on top of the curses you're doing, which is a bit of a tricky mechanic. There will be a link in the descriptions below for that as well. The next ability is the Animate Weapon. Now, Animate Weapon is a very niche approach of playing. It used to be absolutely amazing back in the days during Breach League, where we used the chaos damage with them and Castle Challenge to summon them with Wither. It was an amazing build. However, that's been fucked over and nerfed. So right now, the playstyle is quite a few different playstyles with it. You can have ranged animate weapons, and you can have melee animate weapons. The best way to summon the melee enemy weapons is to use blade abilities that create lingering blades on the ground, which you then summon, and they can do an obnoxious amount of damage. I think this build is really cool, but it does have some ramp up time, so you have to actually smack up some blades on the ground before you can summon them, and then go ham with it from there. So it's a bit of a niche playstyle. It kind of has some halting issues, and you kind of want to be careful with the ability on lower budgets, because if the weapons dies, you can then be sitting there spamming Bladefall on the ground to then put your weapons back up on the field. And that's just one out of many different playstyles. I do think that it's a great bosser, and once you get the build up and running, it's amazing for clearing as well. So I'm going to put that on a B tier. C tier incoming. Not for enemy weapons, it's too good. Too good. And then obviously we have the Blink Arrow. Now, this build is combined with Mirror Arrow. So those two, Blink Arrow, Mirror Arrow, they're pretty cool. They basically require you to use a bow, and you blink or Mirror Arrow, and it creates a copy that uses your bow. This is also referred to as the Bama build. Now, a friend of mine called Previ has been the forefront in the community for pushing out Bama builds. It's also the person that I mostly talk to when it comes to designing and min-maxing minion builds. We've I think it was Previ that was the one who brought Previ that brought up the attention of the 12 passive cluster jewels to be better than the 3 notable strategies we've been using for a few leagues now. So he's a great guy when it comes to minion builds. However, I am not a big fan of Bama builds. I don't like the way it's played. I feel that in lower budget, it lacks a lot of efficiency, whereas in higher budget approaches, it can be absolutely insane and super effective. Now, because the fact that I don't like the fact that it doesn't work on lower budgets makes me put it down a tier from that alone, but I know for a fact that this is a very, very good build if you want to spit currency into the pot. I'm going to put this on an A tier because I think that the build can absolutely shit on everything in the entire game if you want to. It's just that I don't like the lower budget approaches to it. I don't like the high budget either, but in terms of efficiency, I don't think that is very good on the lower budget ends. Next up is the Golems. Now, I have only Karen Golem here to represent all the Golems, because there's quite a few different Golem builds you could do. You can do Pale version, you can do Cold Conversion, you can be in a position where you mix and max it, but I'm not a big fan of it. You can use Stone Golems as well with the recent fixes to it. But Golem builds are very, very, very strong in the current state of the league. They work very fine as league starting. They work somewhat fine in solo self-fund for the most part as well. You just need to know what you're doing. They are amazing on higher budget with the aura stacking becoming super, super tanky and still having good damage, even though they're slower clearing than some other minion builds. But because of how efficient they are on both low budget and high budget, they will have to be a D tier, because I fucking hate them. Fuck Golem builds. I'm just kidding. They're going to be an S tier. Because it's probably one of the best minion builds you can use, minion skills you can use in the current state of the game. Another S tier is obviously the Spectres. Everybody knows this. Spectres to me is better than Golems, so I would prefer to put them like a little bit above here. That would be my preferable spot for them. Basically, Spectres works as effectively as the Golems on lower budgets. There are very many different ways of playing them. I, for example, love the idea of Necromantic Aegis, which other content creators such as Baller Mage or Kai Gaming does not like. And it's just a matter of personal preference. And both me, Kai, and Baller Mage, all three of us, we have different approaches to how we play Spectre builds. And I think that that's really good for the community. My personal preferred playstyle is rather squishy with this build, because I like the amount of damage you can push out and kill bosses in less than a second, which I think is really fun with it. And you can get really nasty clear speed compared to what Golems can achieve. But yeah, I mean, both Baller Mage and Kai Gaming likes the more tankier approaches to it, where they don't take Necromantic Aegis, and Kai Gaming has a few other variations of it that I don't. So I think it's really cool. But yeah, Ray Spectre is without a doubt an S tier. And this is only talking about damage dealing Spectres. Now, the other aspect of Spectres and why it should be above Golems, in my opinion, in this tier list, is very simple. Spectres can also be used as utility tools. Now, we know that the Chieftain monkeys, for like the Carnage and Host Chieftains, that generates power charges and frenzy charges, they are somewhat squishy with the recent nerfs to Spectres, but there are other approaches of utility usage. You can have the debuffs of the Wild Bristle Matrons, giving you an action speed debuff on the enemies, which is really strong. You can use Arena Masters, that gives you an extra surge of attack speed, movement speed, and cast speed, which is also really effective. So you can use them as a utility support. Another aspect of Ray Spectre is for the very popular Detonate Dead build made by Cicerin and Steelmage, I think. I might be wrong on the names there. I know that Cicerin has been playing it a lot. I've seen a couple of other content creators playing it. The Detonate Dead build is a really cool build, and one of the ways to get really juicy corpses is to use Ray Spectre with very specific monsters that has very high base HP pools. So that's another way where Ray Spectres just has more usage across the field than just for a Ray Spectre damage build. Speaking of utility supports and whatnot, I will talk about skeletons first. Now, skeletons have the Dead Reckoning Jewel, allowing you to have mage skeletons, which got a significant buff into 3.13, making them very, very good, but not good enough in my opinion because of how strong Spectres are. It would still be better to use the Lich Queen build guide, which is basically using Spectres for clearing and Skeletons for single target. But however, the Skeleton builds are pretty cool. They're very niche. They do require you to summon Skeletons on each pack that you need to kill, especially in indoor maps can be a bit annoying. But it is a really cool build, and it does very well. But I don't feel that I can put it on an A tier, because I would argue very loudly that Bama builds would be a lot better than Skeletons. So I'm going to have to put them in line with the anime weapon. Next in line, which is combined with Skeletons, is actually Dark Pact. Now, Dark Pact is a spell. It's a minion spell, which it creates a chaos damage. But using this together with Skeletons makes this an insane build. It is actually one of my favorite builds, together with the Spectres. Those are my two most enjoyable builds that I've ever played in this game over the past 7 years and 25,000 plus hours. I think that Dark Pact is severely underrated. It is very insane amount of damage. It's very tanky. I've been able to do 100% Delirium maps solo without Harvest Crafting back in 3.12, and it's just been absolutely amazing with the efficiency of what that build brings to the table. And what's really cool with it is that because it's so underrated and very few people are playing it, I even have a guide for it. It was a guy called Ravion who brought up the original idea. I have to mention that as well, that my build guide is based on. The cool thing with Dark Pact is actually that there's so few people playing it that the items for the build is generally very cheap. And you can easily, without Harvest Crafting, reach about 50 to 60 million Shaper DPS. And that's in mediocre budget. You can push that to 100 or 150 million Shaper DPS without that impacting the actual defensive stats of the build with the max block cap, the sustain of the EHP, which is very high, and allowing you to do 100% delirium map. So when you're pushing damage for this build, you don't really lose any defense, which I think is really cool. So I'm going to have to put the Dark Pact up on the S tier because I think it's an amazing build. It does have about the same player speed as the Golems, but slightly slower player speed compared to the Spectres. But boss damage is absolutely crazy, and the sustainability in the defense is very, very, very good. Then we have Dominating Blow. Now, Dominating Blow is a bit of a tricky approach to it because the higher budget DB builds are not very good compared to higher budget of other minion builds. But what's really good with Dominating Blow is how effective it is as a league starter. You don't need anything to make a DB build work. And you basically combine that with Herald of Purity for more damage. And I think that DB is just absolutely crazy good in that sense. And it works so well in Soul Self-Fan as well because of how good it works in League Start, as well as not requiring anything to actually work. And that's why I think the Dominating Blow is a really cool ability. The problem I have with DB is as soon as you want to do harder endgame content, it's going to be a bit tricky. You're going to have to start investing into it. And I would personally rather invest into other things. So I would say that this is an S tier League starter, but I'm going to have to put it on a C tier because I'm not personally a big fan of how it approaches on the mid-end game to the end game or absolute end game content because it kind of lacks efficiency, but it's a very cool build. Some people like it more than I do, but League starting with it is absolutely crazy. And this is also where I'm going to put the C tier for the Herald of Purity. I'm currently playing it on stream right now. I think that a pure Herald of Purity build is so-so. It does have a lot of mechanical quirks to it. I would never play it in hardcore, but definitely a bunch of quirks that you need to go through, like making sure that you have your minion summoned and playing by those rules and how it works. And I'm not a big fan of the approach of it, which is why I'm going to have to put it on a C tier. And then we have Herald of Agony. Now, I know that Herald of Agony can be very good. It can be very, very good. The problem I have with Herald of Agony is that it's fucking boring to play. It's so fucking boring and slow and dull. D tier. And this is also where I'm going to put Holy Relic. It's terrible. So slow. It's not just slow, it's just shit. That's my opinion on it. It's disgusting. You can make it very tanky if you want to. I just don't like playing a super tanky build that does some damage and then shit has terrible clearing speed. It's so boring to play. So that's where we're putting Holy Relic and the Herald of Agony. I would even argue for putting Holy Relic on C tier because if you go with the extra Holy Relic helmet, I think it's Joffrey's crest. No, not crest. It might be the crest. Joffrey something. You can actually make a Holy Relic have decent clearing with proper AoE from the explosions from Holy Relic, and that can actually be a pretty cool build. And you can sustain that and supplement it with other minions like Herald Purity and support Spectres and whatnot. So I think Holy Relic actually is better than Herald of Agony personally. So I think that's just my take on it. It's just terrible how bad Herald Agony is. However, we have the two generic minions that we've had for many, many years in this game. One of them being SRS and one of them being Race Zombie. Let's start with the SRS. Now, SRS is a personal nostalgic ability for me. I played it so much early on. The damage it shits on is so good. It is so good. There are two different ways of playing it. I know some content creators prefer to do the minion instability, also known as popcorn SRS, where you basically degen your SRS and let them explode. Now, I don't think that approach is very good because it's kind of unreliable in some situations because you have no damage, and then when your minions pop, you have all the damage. When I know that I can, like my build guide I have for this, I know that I can make them do up to 50, 60 million Shaper DPS without any obnoxious amount of currency to hitting damage up to 50 to 60 million Shaper DPS, which is reliable, sustainable damage output, which I would much rather play because it means that when I summon an SRS, it's going to run up to an enemy and it's going to start hitting that. I don't have to wait for a second. I don't have to wait for 2 seconds before that minion pops and dies so that the pack that it's on is dead. Because the SRS can kill an entire pack and then move on to the next pack while summoning new ones. So that's why I think that the damage is absolutely crazy good in that approach. But you can do popcorn if you want to, which can be very good for popping bosses, of course. That's a very effective way to pop bosses when it comes to popcorn. The problem with SRS, though, is that because minions or enemies can't aggro SRS, they can't have any aggro table, so enemies don't actually target them, but they can take damage from collateral AoE splashes and stray projectiles that are targeting you or maybe your support minions, and then they can hit the SRS. But outside of that, they don't aggro, which means that enemies will be going for you or your support minions. And because of this, it has a tendency of lacking defenses and can be somewhat squishy to play, which comes down to matter of personal preference in your playstyle. Because if you actually adapt your playstyle around the SRS, it's not about going in forward, summoning, and moving in forward, summoning. You kind of want to circle around the enemy packs, not going in there, because you need to make sure that your SRS actually going up there and killing them before the enemies goes up to you and kills you. So kind of a race to the death kind of idea with it. But because of the damage approach of it and the lack of defense, I'm gonna have to put it on a B tier. I prefer it over these builds, and I'm putting it on the same efficiency as the skeletons and the enemy weapons because of the playstyle of my personal take. And then we have Race Zombie. Now there are multiple ways of playing Race Zombie. One of the better ones is strength stacking. Now I think that's a really cool build. It's very, very tanky. If you put a lot of currency into a Race Zombie build, it can be very, very good. The problem I have with Race Zombie is actually that Golem builds is better. Race Spectre builds is better. Dark Pact is better at everything than our Zombie build is. However, I would also argue that Bama build would be better than Race Zombie as well at everything. So this leaves us to the B tier, where we have considering putting enemy weapons, skeletons, and SRS. And I personally would play all of those 3 builds before I touch the zombie build personally. But I think that the zombie build, depending on how you approach it, especially with the sustainability of the strength stacking Baron, I think that Race Zombie would be equivalent to the efficiency of the enemy weapons, skeletons, and SRS. So we're going to have to put it on a B tier. So this is basically my list. I'm going to ask my editor Kikis to just add some text in on the skills so people know, because not everyone knows the icons. And yeah, I hope you guys like the tier list. If you guys think that I'm completely fucking wrong and I'm a retard, hit me up in the comments below and what you guys think about your tier. I would actually love to see you guys type your own tier list of minion skills in the description below. And if you think that I should have brought in some unique stuff such as the Arcali's Fang or whatnot, let me know in the comments below what you guys think about this. Hit the like button because that really helps the channel. And if you don't, you'll never get an Exalted Orb drop again in Path of Exile. GHAZZY already confirmed that to me, so if you want to have RNG, hit the like button. Subscribe for more content. Until next time, boys, stay safe. Bye.